music.
Okay, so I just had a very interesting phone call that I wanted to share with you all right away. I have a uncle who I'm very, very close with. His name is Larry Christopher. And long story short, he just called me and he said, nephew, I'm whipping it up today. I'm going to make some of that sourdough bread. He said, do you want the loaf or do you want some of the starter? And for those of you who don't know, sourdough bread is a very intensive process. So you have to have it in a certain environment. It has to be covered. It has to be protected. It has to be fed. And it takes a series of all these various steps in order to materialize the starter into loaf. And I was convicted because my natural inclination right away was to say yes to the loaf. But something in me said, ask more. So I began to ask questions about what does it take in order for me to take that starter and materialize it into a loaf? What's that whole process like? And then I was convicted even more because I had to ask myself, how many times in life have I chose the loaf over the starter? How many times have I made financial decisions that might feed me now versus a decision that could sustain me for a lifetime? How many relationships have I entered in because they fed me where I was in that moment of time? And how many times have I chose those loaf type relationships over the starter type relationships? Relationships that I'm going to have to nurture, relationships that I'm going to have to pour into, but I'm building something that would sustain me for a lifetime. How many times physically have I taken the easy way out over making the decisions and developing the disciplines that would sustain a healthy lifestyle for a long time? How many times professionally have I made decisions based off of where I was in the moment and what my appetite and hunger was for in the moment over making decisions that would sustain me for a lifetime and build a legacy well beyond the time that I'm here? So I had to ask myself, and I have to ask myself looking forward with every decision that I make, am I going to choose the loaf or the starter? Am I going to choose the thing that feeds my appetites and my cravings in the moment? Or am I going to choose something that, yes, it takes processes. Yes, it takes systems and structures. And yes, it takes steps, but it will sustain me. It will protect and preserve me time after time after time. And lastly, the thing that I realize about the starter is, why would I choose one loaf when I can choose the starter and produce loaf after loaf after loaf after loaf? So my challenge to you is, ask yourself, do you choose the loaf or the starter? What decisions have you made that were loaf type decisions versus starter type decisions?